So when I think about Mattox's story, he was induced at 38 weeks, and it was a kind of an uneventful time, but obviously that's very normal during this time to go ahead and induce, even, without an exact problem or reason. But I think in hindsight, that was probably something that led to where we were with Mattox. And even from an early time with Mattox, he just seemed a little bit different with his disposition. As a baby, he was a little bit harder to soothe, a little bit more grouchy. I can distinctly remember he was a few months old. We took him to the beach, and he hated the water and hated the ocean, and things that other children seem to always love, they really seemed to upset him. He just kind of started this cycle of unhealth, I guess would be the only way I could describe it, in the fact that he just, things that other people could get over or deal with easily, it just kind of kept him down. He had eczema, he had this or that. We were over with specialists, just seemed like all the time. Nothing really major, but just kind of nagging things that always seemed to be kind of plaguing Mattox around the corner. When you would watch him socially, he just really didn't have the same level of interactions with other kids his age, usually fighting over toys. He wanted to be with friends, but he always, would argue and fight, couldn't share, a lot more extreme than you would see with normal toddlers. He was very slow to walk. He did not start walking until 15 months. He babbled a little bit as a toddler, but it wasn't until he was 3 that he really started talking. He was just my late bloomer with everything. But again, as we kind of went through these milestones, everyone just kind of kept saying, don't worry about it too much. He's fine. This is normal. Kids are all different. Just because, again, that he's not like his older brother doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It just means they're different. But I've always just sensed to have this kind of nagging feeling that there was something a little bit more to it along the way. I knew he wasn't ready for kindergarten, but I also really worried about the stigma in his mind of having to repeat kindergarten. So I had him enrolled into a Montessori kindergarten, not in the public school that we typically would have taken him to, so that it seemed like a separate experience of what he might have had within kindergarten. Also, with the freedom of some of the Montessori style of learning, also revealed some things socially that were just a little bit more extreme than other kids that he was around at Montessori. And it was actually his kindergarten teacher who approached us. She had also had children with ADHD, and she brought to our attention that she felt like he had characteristics of ADHD. We immediately went in, within a couple of weeks we were scheduled with the neurologist, and then we were started on stimulant medication without really knowing much else or trying much else. So that's kind of where our process started. Oddly enough for me as well, I'm a pharmaceutical rep. So medicine is an area that I know, trust, and I've seen many good things happen with medication when it's used appropriately. So I guess at that time I naively thought, oh, we'll just put him on some medication and things will be great. It wasn't that easy or anywhere close to that with Mattox. By the spring of 2019, they went and had us evaluated, or had him evaluated rather, for autism. And at that point, they didn't think there was enough there to get the diagnosis. So we continued on our route with medication as well. Eventually, we got put on to a non-stimulant medication. We have seen some benefit with that, but again, there was just this constant feeling of that wasn't the answer for us. It really didn't solve the problem. While it did help in some small ways, I just knew that there was more to my kid than what I was seeing and what I was getting out of the process with it. So I always felt like I was constantly looking for something else. And as you can imagine, we would go through cycles where he'd seem a little bit better, and then we'd have a rough patch at school. And every time those rough patches came up, that's when I would feverishly start Googling and trying to find new answers for Mattox and try to find something along the way with him. So living with Mattox is it's really hard some days. As a mom, you love your kid. But there's days that he's not very likable. And the hard part was, is you could see, he knew that friends were having a hard time playing with him, or that people were upset with him. And it just started this spiral with him where he just decided that's kind of who he was. He was a bad kid and he got in trouble, and that was his identity. So that brings the whole family down. His brother kind of avoids playing with him sometimes because it's just easier to not engage than it is to have to always play by Mattox's rules, or how he plays or how he does things. And I've seen it myself where other kids will avoid him, and not out of meanness, but because he's a challenging kid to play with. But the part of that I always knew, Mattox in a good moment has a beautiful mind and imagination and a caring heart. And so, you just keep fighting to try to see more and more of that out of him. But, so this last year was a nightmare a lot of ways in school. And, it feels really hopeless as a mom to not be there with him, but to get messages throughout my work day to know that he's had a bad day. And so you bring him home at night and you don't know whether to punish him in the short time you get him at night, or to love on him extra, or what you do to try to change behaviors. And we've tried all of them. And you read and you think and you try to every ways to persuade him. You try diet and more exercise and different strategies out there to try to help him with that. And it just, it's all consuming for a family to try to figure out what's the right next thing is to do and how to help your kid. As a parent, I feel a lot of times judged by other parents as they watch when they have neurotypical kids or kids that don't have the same struggles. Or you might be in a restaurant and you feel like somebody's watching you. Well, why don't you discipline your child? Well, I've tried discipline. I tried, you try to redirect and you try to do things. My kid has a different way that he responds to it, and not everyone understands. And actually, most people, I didn't understand until I raised a kid that had similar issues. And when he's stuck in that mode where he's in fight or flight, or when he's upset, his mind takes him in a whole different direction, and you can't really reach him in those moments with that. Through the years, we've tried diet intervention. We've removed all gluten and dairy for time periods. We have made him drink all kinds of crazy concoctions of supplements and things that we thought perhaps he was missing in his diet because his diet's so poor due to texture aversion. We have been doing neurofeedback for over a year, and we've seen small improvements with that. He was seeing a counselor regularly as well, and counseling I think was really helpful, but the problem was all these things would make sense to him until he would get into a moment where he was in that fight or flight moment, and everything else then was out the window. So before and after, you can have all the conversations about these things you want, but it wasn't really getting in those moments where we really needed him to pull through with that. But at the time, we were spending so much time and energy on things that we were getting very small return, and it was making him miserable in the process, and all of us miserable in the process to try to do all these things. The whole idea of chiropractic seemed a little bit out there to me as something I would do. Again, I come from a world of pharmaceutical training and medical studies, and I had a lot of doubt. And I would watch and think about this, and the PWC, not just because of seeing it on my Facebook feed, but just there's something about it, whether it was a God nudge or what it was, it just kind of kept entering my mind. And for the first time when you watch that, you get a little glimpse of hope and the excitement in a world where nobody really shows much excitement. Our own neurologist in the past looked at me when I was talking to him about things after a frustrating period, and he just told me, well, I guess this is just who your kid is. Well, yeah, that is who my kid is, and I love him for it. But I, as a mother, would would never give up on knowing that there was happiness and there was something more to life than why he was living. From the moment I first talked to Jackie at PwC, the whole experience was completely different. From the beginning, all they wanted to know was about my child. And it wasn't some cookie cutter solution that a counselor can give you. Well, maybe if you rephrase your questions, this and that, and which I'm not saying isn't helpful. Jackie, for the first time, sat with me on the phone while I cried. And truly understood, because she's been there with her own child. But to be in a place where everyone doesn't just tolerate it, they celebrate it and they learn more about him. That's all a mom would ever hope for. The experience with this has been night and day different than anything we've ever experienced. So I think for me, seeing the scans the first time, my initial reaction was just finally something concrete that shows what I see in my child every day. So it was something concrete to say, okay, here we are, and then to see continued scans too and see improvements. It's very gratifying to see those improvements and know that we're heading in the right direction. The one moment that just really stands out for me where I've seen with Mattox since we've been here was yesterday at the lake, and he worked really hard on building a sand tank, which is something he's super passionate about, and the girls didn't know it was his and smashed it. And normally that would have set him off, and I don't even know what he would have said or done, or I definitely wouldn't have been proud of it. But it was one of those moments for him that old Mattox would have been mad maybe for an hour, yelling and screaming and throwing a fit. He literally took maybe a minute and he calmed himself down rather than going up and out of control. I can't even think of a time in my life where I've ever seen him do that. It's been a very, very long time, and it's something that just, I sat on the beach and cried tears of happiness, because I'm starting to see that he's got the tools in there. That kid was in him this whole time. In the time that we've been here, he actually has just recently stopped all medication. So everything we're seeing right now is it's just him. It's his nervous system that's able to now do all this on his own, without a medication, without anything else. He's able to do it. I think my husband and I would definitely both agree that, I guess the only regret is I wish we'd done it a little sooner and not waited so long. Chiropractic was scary to me because it was different, but it was the right answer 100% because it was different. And why PwC chiropractic was different is because they did want to know about my child as a whole. They're not just looking at one aspect of his behavior, they're looking at several different aspects with it. And they guide you and they talk to you through the whole process. That alone is worth it to me. And just to have somebody else get it and care and work with us to help find the answers. In this world, it's easy to let doubts take over because we're trained to kind of be a pessimist and negative. There's so many things out there that are false. But from the moment I talked to Jackie and to Dr. Tony, you can't help but just feel the genuine passion that everyone there has about helping your kid and wanting to learn about your kid and trying to walk with you to find some answers to help your kid be successful. My name is Ashlee McNabb, and we will make it through the storm.